Every day, you and I get bombarded with negative news. And just like our bodies becomes what we eat, our minds become the information that we consume. If you want to stay positive, it's so important that you also listen to stories that inspires you and uplifts you. In this podcast, we interview world-leading experts dedicated to solving the world's most pressing problems. And if you stick around, I promise you will not only be as informed as if you watch the news, you will feel uplifted, inspired, and have more positive energy in your life. Welcome to Great.com Talks with. Hi and welcome. Today Great.com talks with Ginny Ehrlich, who is the CEO of brightpink.org. And if you haven't heard of them before, Bright Pink helps to save lives from breast and ovarian cancer by empowering women to know their risk and manage their health proactively. And if you're new here into this podcast, definitely press subscribe, either on YouTube or in your podcast app, because today we're going to raise awareness and find out what every young woman and man as well should know about breast and ovarian cancer. So Ginny, thank you so much for taking the time to come here and educate us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. We're thrilled to be with you today.
Beautiful. So before we jump into it, how would you describe Bright Pink to someone that is not familiar with your organization?
So Bright Pink, as you mentioned, is on a mission to save lives from breast and ovarian cancers, and to do so by ensuring that all women, no matter what their circumstance, and especially women 18 to 40, can know their risk for breast and ovarian cancer and take proactive charge of their health.
Okay, so what is needed then from a woman to know her risk? What questions does she need to ask herself?
Yeah, so, I think the most interesting thing is that the science and technology is such that we don't have to wait as women to get a mammogram to know whether or not we're at a higher risk for breast cancer and ovarian cancer. Because for women who have family history and hereditary risk, there are opportunities to do genetic testing to identify whether or not they are carrying a genetic mutation that might put them at elevated risk for breast and ovarian cancers. And if they are, those women have a variety of different risk-reducing strategies that they can take on much earlier than waiting for cancer to happen. And what Bright Pink is about is making sure that all women know that opportunity exists for them at a much younger age, between 18 and 40, and that they have the tools and resources to get started with that. We have an Assess Your Risk quiz that's available at brightpink.org, which is just a 5-minute quiz that women can take to identify whether or not they might be at higher risk. And if so, what steps they can take to identify whether or not they're a genetic mutation carrier. And if they're at average risk like I am, what different lifestyle factors they can take in order to reduce their overall risk for breast and ovarian cancer. So what we're trying to do is really transform that 40 norm back to much younger, so that younger women can start taking charge of their breast and ovarian health early, because the medicine and technology allows them to. Yet in the United States, fewer than half of women actually know that. So we have a knowledge gap as to where science and medicine is.
Got it. There were so many interesting things in what you just said that I would like to tread off on.
Sure.
And I must say, I really enjoy the proactive approach. I think it can save so much suffering. Getting a relative easy, I guess, genetic testing. Is it early than having these big consequences later? So I'm curious, is it only if your parents are in risk that you should be concerned, or is it more cousins and further relatives as well? And is this genetic testing, is it one of those home kits you order, or is it something more advanced?
Yeah, so we have some family history tools that really help women assess whether or not they have, it's not just their mothers, right? It's their aunts and others. So there are family history tools that we make available for women, as well as the Assess Your Risk quiz, to identify which relatives matter in the whole picture of it. And then from there, identifying whether or not they might be good candidates for genetic testing, and identifying whether they're a gene mutation carrier. In terms of, there are so many different situations. I can't say, if it's X, then Y. That's really kind of the beauty of the tool that we have. It has a really strong algorithm to figure that out. So there's not kind of a very simple answer to that. But I think what the nice thing is, in terms of genetic testing and counseling, is that here in the United States, at least, there are consumer-initiated options where women can order tests directly, get genetic testing or counseling if they want it, and get their results. And there are provider-initiated options, so they can work through a healthcare provider to get a test. So there are different ways, and different women make different decisions on which one's right for them in terms of how they want to kind of go through that genetic testing and counseling process.
Got it. Thank you so much for that explanation. So I'm curious then, both what other than genes is putting someone in the risk zone, and that kind of goes into what you said about health education as well. What can someone do to get out of that risk zone and make healthier choices?
Yeah, so I think that there are a number of options, and something that we feel very strongly about is that women who might be at higher risk because of genetic mutations get to make their own decisions on their own timelines. So there's not one option. There are so many options. So for example, if a woman for reducing her risk around breast cancer, she can do increased surveillance and screening much earlier than when women typically start their mammograms, and work with a provider or a team of providers to really identify what that more intensive screening and surveillance looks like. There are also chemo prevention options. There are drugs that have been typically used for chemotherapy that can be used to kind of reduce risk around breast cancer. And then some women elect to have risk-reducing surgery, double mastectomies that are proactive and prophylactic to eliminate the breast tissue that could become cancerous over time. So there's kind of a continuum of options. We actually have a group of ambassadors who are generally previvors, as we call them, women who have had lived experience with this. And those women make different decisions at different times. And so there's a lot of, on brightpink.org, there's a lot of content and stories for women who have gone through this health journey and made different decisions over time. For ovarian cancer, similarly, there are a variety of options that women can take who are at higher and elevated risk. Actually taking combined hormonal birth control for up to 5 years in women's 20s and 30s, reduce risk of ovarian cancer because they ovulate fewer times, and that makes a difference in terms of cancer risk. There are also additional screening and surveillance components that women who might be at elevated risk can start doing in consultation with a provider. And women can elect to have surgery, oophorectomy, hysterectomies, et cetera, to reduce their risks as well. And those surgeries can be timed around family planning needs and things like that. Again, every option is really, which option or which route women take on those matters should be on their terms and their timelines, but they're all available to them. And the more that women know early about what their risk is, the more they can do. So that's for women who are at elevated risk, but there are things that women who aren't at elevated risk can do. They can maintain a healthy weight. That matters for both breast and ovarian cancer. Not smoke tobacco. Reduce alcohol use to 1 or fewer drinks a day. So there are other really proactive things, and that we provide content on. For breast cancer, exercising at least 150 minutes a week matters in terms of breast cancer risk. So there are some everyday things women can do as well.
Yeah, and those things are also very proactive. So I like that you include that in the package. But when it comes to the first solutions that you mentioned, there's kind of a lot, and I guess it can feel overwhelming for someone coming into this whole world. What can they do to get guidance?
Yeah, I think that the kind of power of Bright Pink is that Bright Pink was founded by a woman named Lindsay Avner, and at the time, which was 2007, she was the youngest woman in the United States to have had a voluntary double mastectomy at 23 years old, based on her family history and genetic mutation carrier status. And she looked around, she saw no peers, right? She didn't have any peers. She didn't have any guidance. She didn't have any support for women who looked like her, were like her, et cetera. And that's why she founded Bright Pink, because she realized that the science at that point was much newer than it is now. Women didn't know what was possible for them. And B, women like her who went through this journey needed the support you're talking about, because making these decisions, especially at such a young age, is so hard and difficult. So in addition to our educational components, our tools like our Assess Your Risk tool to get women started on their journeys, we also have an online support group of women who are going through health journeys, who can compare notes and stories. We have a robust ambassador group of women who've gone through their journeys, who share, kind of the technical aspects of what it was like, but also topics like dating after a mastectomy, right? Like, what is it like as a 20-something-year-old woman to date after a mastectomy? And kind of those going into early menopause, those topics that are the emotional and kind of the feeling side of it, as important and needed in terms of being, women who do go through this, having that type of support.
Yeah, I can imagine how important it must be to not feel like you're going through the struggle and you're also alone. So Thank you much for providing that community service. So where are you hoping that you will move in the next 5-10 years, both as Bright Pink as an organization, but also this whole field in general?
Yeah, I think, like I had said earlier, I think one of the things that we are really focusing on is to really catalyze a new norm, so that women who are much younger than when they start thinking about mammograms, usually around 40, start to think about breast and ovarian health. And start to think about what they can do early on to take charge of their health. Because even though the medical, field has so many options to greatly reduce women's risk of ever developing breast or ovarian cancers, if they are at higher risk, only about half of women in the U.S. know that those options exist for them. And so what we want to do is create a new norm, so we create a better tipping point for women who are at elevated risk to know it and to be able to take that proactive action early. Because right now, so many women are losing that opportunity just by virtue of not knowing what's possible for them. And that is particularly true for women of color. And it's particularly true for women who might be struggling to make ends meet. So that's also a priority for us, as to how do we level the playing field so that all women, regardless of who they are, where they live, what their economic circumstance, has this life-saving information.
Oh yeah, highly important. So I'm curious, what are the challenges for you to reach those women? Because I assume that people in general are not so good at thinking of a problem that could happen 20 years in the future. So what are your challenges to reach people?
Well, you just named one, right?
Yeah.
Prevention. I've spent my entire career in prevention, and it's hard to sell prevention, right? And we tend to, particularly in the U.S., we tend to be very reactive around our healthcare and our health and well-being. So it's really kind of selling the dream of not having to worry about it. And I think if you read a lot of our ambassador stories, the journey was hard. There's no question that making some of these decisions and going through some pretty challenging surgeries is not taxing at the time. But so many of our ambassadors say, and now after this, now I can live my life without worrying about this, without worrying about watching what my mother or my aunt or my sister went through. And so I think that's so liberating. And I think it's hopefully, will sell this, kind of very easy 5-minute quiz you can take, quick things you can do every month to be breast and ovarian self-aware into the younger population. We also, we're a small and mighty organization. So it's about reach. This is a great opportunity to educate your viewers on what's possible for them, and what's possible for, your male viewers to share and kind of suggest to their female friends, loved ones, etc. So part of it's reach, part of it's trying to get this message out to a broader group of people.
I feel like it's working because while trying to be focused on you, in the back of my mind, I should make my girlfriend do this quiz. So how about we're coming to the end of the interview now. So how about we end with, what are the action steps you think every woman should take after hearing this interview to reduce their risk?
Yeah, I think that we talk about 4 things that women should do. First is to know their risk level and to take the Assess Your Risk quiz. It's an easy 5-minute quiz that gives you so much information about what you can do differently, whether it be exercising more, moderating alcohol use, or going further in terms of considering genetic testing and counseling. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is to know what signs and symptoms are important to look for in breast and ovarian cancers, because some of the symptoms for ovarian cancers in particular are things that women experience for a variety of other reasons, bloating, feeling full, etc. So it's also just being really aware and being a good patient advocate to kind of say, hey, this is an issue, to a healthcare provider, don't ignore this. Could it be my ovaries? Could it, be early breast cancer, et cetera? The third is to know our normal, right? And to kind of, know what our normal looks like so we can compare it to the signs and symptoms. 1 day of bloating might be that we ate too much spaghetti the night before, but 2 weeks of it is something to worry about. And then fourth is to practice healthy living, moving more, eating well, maintaining a healthy weight, moderating our alcohol use, getting in every year for our well woman exams or annual exams, getting in for necessary screenings like mammograms. That's number 4.
Beautiful. So clear, so structured. Thank you so much. And Ginny, I really appreciate you coming on to our podcast and educating our listeners about this highly important topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. And we look forward to the episode.
Me too. So thank you. And for you too. And for you listening, if you enjoyed this episode, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because that is showing the algorithms that this is an important conversation. So more women and men can learn about the risks of breast and ovarian cancer, get educated, and take the 4 action steps. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. What is great.com? That is the most common question that we get. And the shortest answer I can give you is that we are a company that is moving money from the online casino industry and donates it to charities that is helping the environment. The long answer, unfortunately I don't have time to tell you today, but if you're curious, definitely Google whatisgreat.com to learn more.